Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for sticking it out to compliance at the end of the day. You're all very brave. My name's Luke Dufour. I'm head of financial crime intelligence here at BVNK. I lead the teams that are carrying out our day-to-day financial crime investigations capabilities, including transaction monitoring, payment screening, some of our more complex investigations, and also our external engagement with law enforcement and banking partners from a financial crime perspective. This is my first foray into crypto here at BVNK. My background is very much traditional finance. I came to BVNK from a clearing bank fintech, working in financial intelligence, running investigations into their financial institution customers, including crypto businesses and sort of large customer populations beneath them. And then before that, I was working for a tier 1 bank in the terrorist financing investigation space, and working also for 2 institutions as part of the National Crime Agency's Joint Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force. So a TradFi heavy background. I'm joined on stage by Amardeep. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So firstly, I'd just like to say a big thank you to BVNK. Our partnership really is instrumental in allowing people and organizations to operate with crypto assets in a safe and compliant way. So my name's Amardeep Thandi, and I'm the regulation and compliance lead at Chainalysis. So really what I do is I help TradFi institutions and also crypto native businesses grasp the ever-evolving landscape of digital assets, build controls, and then operationalize our solution stack into risk management and compliance solutions. So prior to Chainalysis, I was involved in the fin crime investigation space, specifically looking after TradFi institutions that have had some sort of contentious regulatory response matters, including look-back investigations, subpoenas from government agencies and so forth. And then similarly, more recently, I was helping crypto organizations with the same. So before we get into it, I know obviously compliance isn't the most interesting subject of all, but we're going to try and make this as interesting as we can. So today, what we're going to cover, is going to be an introduction into blockchain analytics, Chainalysis. Then we're going to jump into what TradFi institutions are doing in the space right now, give you a little bit beyond stablecoins, although there'll be some stablecoins featured in that, I'm sure. We're then going to get comfortable with crypto platforms, so we're going to demystify some of the common misconceptions and also the due diligence processes on how to get comfortable with operating with crypto businesses. And then finally, we're going to dive into the detail on a granular level of the difference between a fiat transaction and a crypto transaction before we finally end with some Q&A. So just a quick one in the room. Who's actually heard of blockchain analytics? Quick show of hands. Wow, actually there's quite a lot. For those who haven't put your hand up, I hope you take something away from you today. And for those that do, I'm really amazed actually. I've never seen that many hands. So just to give you an idea, this is a typical public blockchain ledger. So you have an alphanumeric string, also known as a wallet address, the crypto equivalent of a bank account number, for example, and then you have some metadata, but not very informative. And what we do at Chainalysis really is to help de-anonymize this information. So I know what you're thinking, how on earth do you do that? So we have an incredibly talented data science team who use analytics, heuristics, open source intelligence, and then also information gathered and shared from our partners to firstly group or cluster, we call it, a number of wallet addresses together based on their behaviors that we know are associated to an individual entity. And then we do the really hard part, which is then actually identify the real world entity associated to those groups of wallet addresses. So as you can see here, we have Binance, a very prominent cryptocurrency exchange. We then have Tornado Cash, a mixing service, and we also have Hydra Marketplace, which is a darknet marketplace. So we don't just stop there. What we do then is take all of these real world services and then we bucket them into very useful categories that allow you to create your risk management frameworks. So there's a lot of categories here. I'm not going to get into all of them today, but anything from a sanctioned entity, terrorist financing, scams, ATMs, and so forth. But you get the idea. We're helping you connect what's happening on the blockchain with real-world services to understand who you're interacting with. So just to give you an idea of how powerful this can be in the real world, so OFAC have recently started to actually place wallet addresses onto the sanction designation lists. So they've actually become very prominent in this space and are adding plenty of wallet addresses to the sanction designation lists on a weekly or daily basis even now. And so they actually sanctioned Hydra Marketplace, which is a darknet marketplace, a web service where you can basically purchase illegal goods. So we're talking guns, drugs, in some circumstances, contract killers, that kind of stuff, really bad stuff. So they were sanctioned, and they actually provided 117 wallet addresses on the sanction designation for Hydra Marketplace. Now, we took those 117 addresses, and we were able to use our heuristics and our analytics to actually identify 6.6 million wallet addresses. So just to give you an idea and to put that into perspective, if you did not have blockchain analytics, you could potentially have been operating with sanctioned entities without obviously knowing so yourself, and we know what happens in that circumstance. Not very good news. So next, I want to touch on, I want to summarize kind of what we do. So we spoke about how we take data. So you can see a number of blockchain networks. So we take all of the data from all the blockchain networks, or as many as we can support at the moment. And we basically de-anonymize that for you. And so we do that to provide actionable intelligence to intel agencies, law enforcement, to drive investigations. We then also provide that to regulators for supervision of the industries of the market now that they are being regulated, and also to central banks, for example, for the creation of country risk assessments. But we also provide services to TradFi institutions and crypto natives in the form of risk management solutions, such as real-time transaction monitoring, counterparty due diligence, and also enhanced due diligence or investigations when looking to investigate a suspicious activity or file a SAR. So next, really, I wanted to touch on how TradFi, is entering the crypto market. We've heard a lot of really interesting kind of stories, use cases, Ripple with their stablecoin coming up. And really, we're at this interesting time where we're seeing TradFi really merge with crypto and digital assets. And I think we've got regulation to really help and cement the maturity of the digital asset as a mature asset class now. And it's really interesting to see what people are doing in the space right now. So just to give you a few very small number of examples of what's happening in the world, I'm pretty sure that you've probably heard of all the noise around the Bitcoin ETFs in the US. So there's been a large number of wealth management institutions that have launched a Bitcoin ETF product recently in the United States. The most prominent being BlackRock, which have been noted for the most successful ETF product in US history. We then have Société Générale in France, who have created SG Forge, which is their digital asset arm, and they've just released, on the topic of stablecoins, a euro-denominated stablecoin. We have PayPal that we've discussed already with their stablecoin. Revolut, in the past couple of weeks, have just launched their own cryptocurrency exchange. And we also have the likes of Standard Chartered, for example, who have Zodia custody solutions to enable the custodying, safeguarding of institutional digital assets. So this is only a small number of what's happening. You've heard more today as well, but I just wanted to give you an idea. But you must be thinking, okay, well, how does a TradFi organization that's maybe opposed to entering the crypto space actually get there? So what we do is we break that down into what we have framed the crypto maturity model. So we break it down into phases to allow you to really enter the space with confidence. And so we start with level 0, which is education, strategy, and planning. You have the commercial side of the business looking and kind of understanding what types of products and services that we can offer. And then you have the enterprise risk teams within the TradFi institution that come together to, most of the time, create some sort of digital asset working group. And from that working group, they can then understand, okay, well, what services can we offer and how do we manage the risk when we want to introduce those levels of services. Approximately 90–95% of the TradFi space globally is in the level 0, right? We're then moving into level 1, which we call open for business, right? So open for business is now being comfortable with actually allowing your retail customers to send funds to crypto businesses, but then also providing banking rails to crypto businesses themselves, so in the form of client money accounts, for example. Then level 2, we've talked about synthetic crypto products, ETFs, for example, but also white label solutions, so having a bank that provides a mobile phone banking app that allows you to purchase crypto, but not actually doing that yourself, partnering with a crypto provider, and also then not actually physically touching it yourself, so risk mitigation. Then moving beyond that into actual having custodial infrastructure, so level 3, enabling crypto deposits. Now you're actually in a position where you have the infrastructure to allow crypto deposits into and withdrawals outside of your business. And then finally, beyond deposits, where we typically see the crypto exchanges of the world. So, crypto reward credit cards, staking, decentralized finance types of products and services. So, there's quite a lot going on, and that's kind of where we are at the moment. So, I think what I'll do now is just hand over to Luke to talk to you a bit more about how we actually get comfortable with crypto business.
Thanks very much, Amardeep. So yeah, we've seen the sort of crypto adoption model and the journey on which a bank or a traditional finance firm would go on to adopt crypto and start getting involved with this industry. But how do we take that first step from 0 to 1? What are the sort of assessments that we need to make, and what are the, like I say, first steps we need to take to onboarding an entity? If we leave the sort of product-related risk of crypto aside for a moment, I think a lot of the assessments we would be expected to make will be very familiar to traditional financial institutions in onboarding any other TradFi financial institution. So I'm thinking about instances of a bank onboarding an EMI, electronic money institution, for example, or a PSP, or a card acquirer. A lot of the same assessments that we'd have to make in onboarding a crypto firm will feel very familiar. Examples being, we'd need to understand the nature and purpose of that relationship. Are we entering into a correspondent banking style relationship, an agency banking style relationship, or are we entering into an embedded banking style relationship, which seems to be the way the winds are blowing at the moment. And you start to introduce things such as reliance models and oversight models when doing so. But that fundamental understanding of the nature of the relationship is something we have to do in TradFi, and we'd have to do in onboarding a crypto business as well. We'd also want to understand the reputation of the business we're onboarding. Are they a mature and reputable player in the industry, or are they a fledgling startup that are still finding their feet? We'd also want to understand what does the sort of financial crime framework look like overall? Is it well established? Who's the MLRO? Do they have the policies and procedures in place that you'd expect them to have? Are they doing all the monitoring that we think they should be? You'd want to consider things such as the customer base being targeted by the crypto firm as well, same as you would in the TradFi space. Is this a retail offering? Are they offering small, medium businesses access to crypto rails? Are they providing services to corporates who want to move their treasury funds around the world? Slight plug there for us. But these are the kind of assessments that we'll be used to making when onboarding TradFi firms, and it's very similar in onboarding a crypto firm. Now, bringing back the product-related risk and something that we will need to address, you would need to do that in the TradFi world as well, assess the products you're actually offering. But bringing back the crypto risk here, one of the things that we would need to establish is crypto is a very broad umbrella, right? And there's lots of sort of sub-services and products that sit beneath that. So one of the key differences between TradFi and crypto onboarding would be to really understand the crypto product that the firm you're onboarding offers and the risks that might expose you to in doing so. We can't mitigate risks if we haven't identified them and assessed them. So you need to understand what the actual offering is and what risks that brings. And then I think one of the key differences between onboarding a TradFi firm and a crypto business would be we can see the on-chain activity as part of the inherent transparency of the blockchain. We can see what this firm is up to on the blockchain, and whether all of this risk assessment that we're doing, that I mentioned the factors earlier, whether all of this in theory is actually crystallizing, materializing into a risk on-chain, we can use, and Amardeep's going to take us through one of the solutions that we can use to do that in a moment, but we can use these solutions to identify whether risks are actually present within a firm and ask pointed questions. How have you mitigated that risk? We see you're particularly exposed to a particular risk that Chainalysis may have identified. What are you doing about it, and how can I take comfort in onboarding you and you're ensuring that I'm also not exposed to that same risk? So as I say, I'm going to hand over to Amardeep now, who's going to sort of take us through one of those solutions to review on-chain activity.
Thanks, Luke. So, to start with, I think, to have or build a successful risk appetite statement, you really need to understand, as Luke mentioned, the nuances, the risks involved with all the different types of services, products, and also the categories. So there's a bunch of categories here, and I think the easier places to actually start with are the lows and the severes. I think it's quite straightforward to decide on what types of businesses that you do want to work with, like crypto exchanges, and similarly, the types of services that you do not want to work with, sanctioned entities, terrorist financing. Where I spend most of my time actually is in the middle ground, so between medium and high. When I support my clients, we're looking at understanding, okay, well, how comfortable can I get with some of these in terms of, do I want to be 5%, see 5% of exposure, and so forth. So this is where it's quite difficult. Obviously, you need to have sign-off internally for those risk appetites of those services and so forth. But what I would like to just take a note of here is that these are broader categories, and within those categories are different services that operate in different ways and in different jurisdictions. So just to take one example, crypto exchanges. You might think, okay, well, crypto exchanges, regulated, totally fine. I'm going to be happy to do business with those. Within crypto exchanges, you're going to have a number of exchanges all over the world. There could be an exchange sitting in a country that you don't want to do business with. So these are broader categories, but you need to actually dive in a layer down to understand the businesses within those categories to build a successful risk appetite statement. But what do you do once you've built your risk appetite statement and it's on paper? You need to operationalize that into the software. So here you can see, in terms of the risk entity solution, how easy it is to now look at the categories, select, edit, and start building and operationalizing your risk appetite statement that you have on paper into the platform. So you can edit, you can change from a severe, high, medium, low risk profile, and then more importantly now, you can go into the exposures one level down and really start building out risk threshold alerts for individual categories. So in a scam scenario, are you happy with 5% being a medium-low risk, all based on what your risk appetite is for your business? So we give you that flexibility to allow you to build out, very detailed risk appetite and management solutions. So once that's all set up, what happens? You want to obviously onboard or screen a company, whether that's a partner that you want to start offering crypto services through, or whether that's someone, for example, a bank that wants to onboard and start offering client money accounts to crypto organizations. So what you do is it's as easy as a Google search within the platform, look for and identify the entity that you want to screen, run the screen. Now this is actually ran a screen across the entirety of that entity. So every single wallet address that is associated with that entity that you want to screen has just been ran. You then get the charts here, the bars, right? And that gives you a level of exposure per category. These are either risky categories or just normal categories that we obviously have identified. And as you can see here, you can drill into these. You have a risk rating. That risk rating is based on your risk appetite that you've just set up, not based on any other risk ratings that we have created ourselves. So it's all to do with your risk appetite. You must be thinking, what happens then, when we identify something that's beyond our risk appetite? So now you see basically the red bar emerging. So this indicates that this is beyond your risk appetite. And you can see now that the risk rating for this entity has gone to high. And triggered by what? It's triggered by 18% exposure to scams. So you could have had it set up in your settings that you're only happy with exposure to 10%, for example. Now here it's important to understand that very similar to the fiat world, every organization does have what we term germs. You do have activity that happens. If you go to any bank, they are going to have interactions and be filing suspicious activities with illicit actors and exposures. So nothing to be too alarmed about when you see small amounts. But you can also jump in and you can look at the counterparty. So what's happening here on the screen is you've jumped into that scam alert and you've gone in to have a look at, okay, well, what are the counterparties? What are these scams that they've been interacting with? And what this provides you is actionable intelligence to go to that entity that you're either partnering with or you want to provide a banking rails to actually then ask informed questions to their compliance function. Okay, well, we see that you've had exposures here on this date. What mitigating actions are you taking to make sure that doesn't happen again? Was there a SAR filed for this, for example? So it allows you to become a lot more comfortable with the entities that you're looking to do business with on-chain. So just to summarize, we allow you to tailor your risk strategy, build out all your settings. We then allow you to really run detailed screening and assess the entity at 1,000 foot, diving into certain areas that you want to know more about. And then we allow you to then benchmark and compare the activity that you've seen against other crypto businesses in the industry as well, just to see whether they're in line with maybe other people that you are operating with and so forth. And then finally, we allow you to audit continuously. So when we talk about rescreening, continuous monitoring, so on a monthly or annual basis, in line with your risk and compliance frameworks. So basically, what we've got there is, 1,000 foot view of an entity, and we do have solutions that we can get into the real granular detail with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Luke, who's going to take you through more of the granular detail.
Thanks very much, Amardeep. So yeah, as Amardeep says, we've now got a view of our entity that we want to onboard from 1,000 foot, and we see the general risks to which they might be exposed. But how does that actually manifest on the blockchain, and how can I go in and have a look at the specific examples of that having happened? So we're going to walk through the same scenario, but looking at it from a fiat perspective, so within the context of a fiat transaction, and we're going to look at the same scenario on the crypto side as well, and what data points are available to us as crypto platforms and yourselves as banks. What controls can we put in place in relation to this activity to stop it happening again? And how can we use these data points to fuel our investigations and analysis? So as a crypto platform, a lot of the information I have in relation to my customers is very similar to what a bank would have in relation to their customers. So that would include things such as KYC and CDD information, which really is sort of the backbone of a financial crime control environment, understanding who your customers are, what they should be doing on your platform, and then you're very quick to identify deviations from that and hopefully catch the bad guys in the act. We collect digital footprint, so as all of us are here, our phones know where we are. We may log into our banking portals from a certain IP address, or we have a device ID that's associated to our specific phone. We can use these pieces of information and build controls based on top of those to, for example, geolocate you to identify if you're in a jurisdiction that we don't want to service, we can prevent access to the platform. Or we can use this in the TradFi world. It's used often in terms of fraud, so identifying single actors accessing through one device multiple accounts, which may indicate that they've managed to get unauthorized access to someone else's account from one device and clear out the funds. We also have a history of activity available to us, and we use this for things such as transaction monitoring and some complex investigations. We can identify patterns based on historic activity, and we, like I say, can identify deviations from that and hopefully quickly find the bad guys. We have customer interactions, not in the same way that a brick-and-mortar bank would have someone going into a branch, what's left of those, going into a branch nowadays and asking, I'm going next week on holiday, my IP address is going to change, please don't block my credit card again. We have interactions with customers digitally, so we have things like help desks and live chats and emails that we exchange with our customers. These can all be used to gather information about our customers and understand the context of their activity on the platform. And then finally, external intelligence, which is a broad term, but one very close to my heart. This is things such as law enforcement information sharing and sharing information with banking partners as well, which kind of serve as big red arrows as opposed to red flags. look over here, there's something going on, maybe said to us by a law enforcement authority, for example. So we as crypto firms can use this information to build controls and fuel our analysis to find bad actors on our platforms. So that's what we have in relation to our customer and what we've collected. Now what does it look like at the point of transaction? So if we take all that information, we apply it to a transaction. This is in the scenario of a fiat transaction. So we see here USD moving from a counterparty to a customer. So a counterparty here being the sender of an inbound transaction to me or a receiver of an outbound transaction from my organization, essentially the person on the other side of the transaction. Now what we can expect to receive in the fiat space and in a sort of funds transfer regulation compliant environment, which is a different topic we don't have time to get into today, but we can typically expect to receive at least these pieces of information. So we have the counterparty's name. We would use that for things such as sanction screening to find out if you're on a sanctions list and we don't want to do business with you whatsoever. We get that in the fiat space. We get the account details. We can use that for pattern recognition and as sort of a unique identifier to build analysis on top of. And we get counterparty addresses and IDs and sort of deconflicting information. So if my customer receives money from John Smith, I want to know which John Smith. This can be a really useful piece of information to identify which. And we get things like counterparty institution from sort codes and BICs and counterparty jurisdictions on top of that as well. So this is the key pieces of information we have available upon which we build controls in the fiat space. So now if we sort of take this same scenario of an inbound transaction, if my clicker will cooperate, and we apply this to the world of crypto. The eagle-eyed among you will have noticed two new boxes appear at the bottom there, which are counterparty risk and counterparty activity. Now, as Amardeep's taken us through, we have this clustering exercise, for example, that's done by Chainalysis and blockchain analytics tools to assign an address to a real-world entity or a real-world risk. That might be terrorist financing or a fraud shop or something we don't want to do business with. When we receive a transaction from a counterparty, we can be alerted to that address being associated to some kind of risk. And we will call that, at least in my team, we call it direct exposure. So we have direct exposure to a risk coming in. We also have counterparty activity, and this was the real eye-opener for me, moving from the fiat space to the crypto space, especially as an investigator. I can go into the counterparty's wallet and see all the transactions that they ever conducted since that wallet became active, and all the transactions after the point at which they send me a transaction. I can go in and see what they've been up to. That's almost in the fiat space like having access to the bank statement of the person who's sending your customer money. It's a really valuable source of intelligence and can really flesh out investigations in the financial crime space. But it doesn't stop at the direct exposure that we have to these entities and their sort of risk profile. We also have something which is called indirect exposure. So beyond the actual counterparty themselves sending us funds, I can also go back in the flow of funds further down the chain, and owing to the inherent transparency of blockchain, review all of the activity that's happened beforehand in the wallet and all of the risks that may exist back in the chain. So as we can see here, bad guys have appeared on screen. I'm not very creative, I'll have to get better at my names, but bad guys have been clustered and linked to terrorist financing by a blockchain analytics tool. We can now see that those funds have gone into a counterparty who has in turn sent those funds to us. Having this visibility, which you wouldn't have in the fiat space, you would only see the counterparty themselves, allows us to get a much richer intelligence picture and sort of risk picture of the transactions that we're processing. And the same applies going forward in the chain. So when the funds leave our environment, we can see to whom they were sent and to where they were onward sent as well, and any risks that are associated to that direct counterparty. And then we have funds going from our customer to this counterparty, and from there they may decide to send them to what we would classify as a high-risk exchange, perhaps in a jurisdiction that we don't want to do business with, or to an entity that's been linked to further bad actors here, terrorist financing again. So we're now starting to get a really rich picture of the risk that in the fiat space would be the funds from the counterparty to customer to counterparty, ostensibly in line with expectations and no risk related to that. But because of the enhanced transparency we have on the blockchain, we can pick out these risks further back in the chain and further forward and provide these sort of intelligence pictures to law enforcement, which is ultimately what we're here to do, right? Provide this to law enforcement and stop financial crime happening. So this just gives a summary of sort of the data points that are available to us in an entire illicit flow, I suppose, in crypto. And then if I were to show you this in the fiat space, I think this is a similar picture. And this is what you'd have to see, I suppose, in the fiat space to have the same risk picture and the same assessment of risk. So Let's hope none of us ever see that, but that is the kind of granularity we can get on the blockchain by doing this zoomed-out analysis of indirect exposure. With that, I'm going to hand back to Amardeep. I think we've covered a lot of the inherent transparency benefits of blockchain and the risks that can detect for us. And Amardeep's going to wrap us up, I think.
Thanks, Luke. So I can't see many people sleeping, so I think that's one thing that we've done okay. I know that, and I'm very conscious that we are in between you and some drinks, so I'm going to be very quick in wrapping this up. So, key takeaways. What have you took away from today? Hopefully, you've took away the importance of blockchain analytics, how it works, how it's used, and how it protects the industry and ecosystem, and allows it to thrive, as I'm sure we all want it to be. We've seen TradFi adoption, the emergence of, I would say, a globalized financial infrastructure underpinned and powered by digital assets. And then we've seen how we can confidently screen, understand, and risk entities that we're looking to either work with, partner with, offer services to. And then finally, we've seen how and what is the difference between a crypto transaction and a fiat transaction in terms of the information that we can actually explore. And now we just want to end with a couple of questions. So hopefully we've got some.
We've got one, I think, that we can that we can answer, and like you said, not stand in the way of the bar. So Amardeep, I'll put this one to you first. So given the wealth of experience that you have across different sectors in the industry, how do the volumes and nature of SARs compare between crypto versus fiat? And I suppose, do you see sort of an uptick in businesses that are engaged in crypto? Do you see them identifying more suspicious activity or being exposed to more suspicious activity? How do you see that dynamic in crypto versus fiat?
That's a fantastic question. So a huge misconception really is that, okay, we're operating in crypto, there's going to be SARs coming out left, right, and center. Not really the case. I was recently in Spain. One of the clients that we work with, a bank, we put on an event and we introduced and invited all of the banks from Spain over to this event. And actually, very, very funnily enough, the same question was asked by someone in the audience to the chief compliance officer of that bank. And the answer, in short, is no. It's very similar to the levels of SARs that you actually identify in the fiat world. So if you are, for example, doing 95% fiat transactions, 5% crypto, there's not going to be all of a sudden the same amount of crypto SAR filings as there are in the fiat world as well. So it's very similar to what you would find in the fiat world, a small proportion. So very common misconception, but very good question.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to that in the cases, at least in my experience, that we see like suspicious activity occurring, there tends to be both a crypto and a fiat element. And I think one of the key things to draw out is that banks are exposed to this kind of activity, you just don't know it, I suppose, is the main thing. So I wouldn't say that I see a disproportionate amount of SARs being filed on crypto activity versus fiat. I think there's always an intersect between the two, and that tends to be how money launderers launder their money, so you see it on both sides. We've got another one, Amardeep, which I'd be keen to hear your views on as well, is with such transparency along the full chain of a crypto payment, which entity is ultimately held responsible for AML prevention?
That's another fantastic question. So I guess it depends on where you are in the chain. I think some of the difficulties that we have is that with on-chain activity, there's too much information. So one of the big, I guess, challenges that we have when trying to run effective AML programs with crypto is how far do you go down the chain, right? So in a fiat world, in a banking environment, for example, you received funds from an entity, you've sent funds from an entity, and that's your obligation done. And to a certain extent, there's some, I would say, almost unfair treating of cryptocurrency transactions because you are privy to this information. You know, okay, well, if I've allowed someone to send funds from my crypto exchange, for example, onto someone else, you can actually watch that transaction go down and down and down on a number of hops. And so a common question that I get asked is, well, how many hops should I be, tracing? And you can't quantify the level of risk in terms of hops. So my biggest advice, which I use quite often with my clients, is you're not looking for the number of hops down the chain, you're looking to identify a change in ownership. So really it's identifying the change in ownership. But to answer the question directly, it is with the body or the entity that's handling the transaction, very similar to the financial industry world.
Yeah. And I'd add to that I think we all need to remember why we're doing this, right? As I said earlier, we're doing this to identify and prevent financial crime. Being able to have such great transparency across the entire movement of funds allows each institution to add their own spin on what's going on and the visibility that they might have, and ultimately inform law enforcement intelligence and subsequent action that they might want to take. So I think the responsibility for AML prevention, as Amardeep says, sits with perhaps the entity involved in the transaction, but the responsibility to sort of feed into this intelligence picture sits with everyone that can see the activity. I think that's our questions done, and I think we'll be told off for overrunning.
Thank you all.
So thanks, everyone.